Aberdeen, Chapter 5, Fallout. I had a horrible dream last night as I tossed and turned in my bed. I was in a dog costume and I was attached to a leash that was wrapped around Aberdeen's hand. We would wander around and have fun, and I would bark and wag my tail. We made our way to a bridge, and she looked over as she grinned and said, "What a beautiful, beautiful river." Again, I poked my head out the side and barked and laughed, and we had fun. Then all of a sudden, she grinned and her eyes got glossed over. She said, "I wonder how far it would be, and if we'd live." I looked at her, puzzled as my ear perked up. "What do you mean?" I thought to myself. I was like, "You're kidding me, right?" She looked over again and said, "Let's find out," and jumped down head first. With the leash still in her hand, I tried to claw and grab and hold on to what I could, but I fell too. We fell for what seemed like forever. And she looked at me and embraced me and said, "It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay," and then we hit the water. When we hit the water, I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, and the burning and the pain from my neck just shot through my body. I couldn't breathe, and there was Aberdeen, eyes wide open, looking at me still. Motionless expression on her face, blood pouring out from her mouth. She killed herself from the fall. Again, in my thoughts, I was trying to struggle. I couldn't move my body, and the river was picking up. Schools of fish and everything were swimming the opposite direction. Things were getting faster, and we were getting tossed amongst the rocks. I was trying to help her, but I couldn't. Everything inside me was telling me to do it, but my body just wouldn't. There was a waterfall at the end, and I just remember shooting up out of my dream, breathing heavily and sweating. I quickly covered my nose because the smell of BO and soot and ash wafted in the air through my fan. As I peeled my way off my bed sheets that were stained from the soot and the stickiness of my sweat, I looked at the clock. It was about 5 a.m., 2 hours early. I walked to the mirror and began to try to rehearse as much as possible to be as believable. So if someone did confront me or try to see if I had an alibi, I'd be able to lie to them like some kind of good actor. Hell, I was no George Clooney, but I had to make do with what I had. I made my way to the shower and turned on all the cold water. As I braced myself with my hand against the wall, the cold shot against me and my body stiffened up and tensed. It was hard to get used to, but eventually I relaxed. I eventually sat down inside the shower and curled up into a ball, thinking of all the anxiety that was filling my mind. I didn't even want to turn on the TV or open up a newspaper or turn on the radio for fear that there would be a broadcast looking for us, like some sort of bounty. I'd turn on the TV or open the pages of my newspaper. Front page, our mugs would be plastered everywhere, with a burning building in the background, like some sort of Bonnie and Clyde wanted poster. I was panicking. But I knew that I had work that day, supposedly. I didn't think anything of it. If I was going to be shocked and surprised, I might as well go like it was any other day. I made my way downstairs, and I knew I was a couple hours early. I kind of generally just tossed my shirt on and barely tucked it into my pants with my tie around my neck. There was a bottle of Jack Daniels sitting on the table from the night before, and I started to take a couple drinks. My roommate walked into the room and asked me what was up. And I said I had a rough night. And he's like, "Oh, did you and Abby break up?" In a condescending tone. I looked at him and said, "No." He said, "Come on, man, I know you like her." And I said, "I hate her." He's like, "Do you like the way she walks or something? Because every time you look at her, your face brightens up. You're like some kind of middle schooler who just got a kiss for the first time." At this point, I looked at him and I didn't know what to think. I tried to stand up and try to confront him, but I slipped and I fell and I knocked the table over. As I tried to stand back up, rubbing my head, he said I was hopeless. He gave me my keys and I walked out the front door. I made my way to the garage and shut the door behind me and got in my car and rolled down all the windows. I turned on the car and let the carbon monoxide fill the room. I thought about it because it was an easy way to get out. I wouldn't have to go to jail. I wouldn't have to deal with all the problems that were now. I wouldn't have to deal with the aftermath and the fallout that was my life now. I wouldn't have to run, I wouldn't have to hide, and I would never have to see anybody, and no one would ever ridicule me again. The smog began to fill the room even more. My eyes began to water from the smoke, and I began to hack and cough. I didn't have the balls to stand up to Abby when I knew that things were wrong. I didn't have the balls to stop her before she blew up my job. I didn't have the guts to stand up to my boss and try to get a promotion, to make something of my poor and pitiful life. And right now I don't even have the guts to kill myself. I turned the car off and opened the garage door as all the smoke billowed out. I coughed and heaved as I opened the side door. I spit up a couple times and I cleared my mouth. I started the car back up and made my way to work. I was ashamed of myself as I punched the dash. How was I going to face Abby? How was I going to face my life after this? I got there and it was pretty much the usual scene. Caution tape and firefighters still trying to put out some of the blaze. Police were standing everywhere with some of the workers being questioned. A guy waved me to a small parking lot that they'd cleared out because the parking garage had been lit up. There was glass and charred paper everywhere all over the streets from the wind and from the explosion itself. And I made my way around back. There were about 5 or 6 tents set up for each department. People were trying to move machinery in, grabbing paper, running back and forth like ants out of a colony. I made my way into one of the tents, and there was my boss with that damn cup of coffee and that smug look. He was clapping his hands, saying, "Everybody, we've got work to do. Come on, let's move, move, move," as he was handing people paper and he was signing off on clipboards. As soon as I walked in, it seems like there was a motion sensor in that dude's head. He came over to me and slapped me on the back and was like, "Looks like we've got a lot of work to do." Correction, you've got a lot of work to do. Here's some papers. I need you to balance some of the accounts. As you can tell, the building was a little bit compromised, so we're going to have to work extra hard today, okay? I sat down and I began to chicken peck on the laptop that he'd handed me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I shut it. He came over and said, "What's wrong?" as he slapped my back and took a sip of that stupid coffee. He said, "We're not going to have a problem, are we?" I took a deep breath and let it out. I handed him the computer and said, "I can't do this anymore," as I stuffed it into his chest. He grabbed it and said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "I can't do this anymore. I can't live this lie anymore. And I can't keep doing your work." At this point, everybody was quiet and staring at us. He said, he started to whisper to me, "Dude, you need to do your job or else we're both going to be in trouble." I said, "No, you're going to be in trouble." As I slapped the cup out of his hand, it cracked and crashed on the floor. He said, "You know, I paid good money for that. The first one's free." He put his finger in my chest, "But you better play ball or you're going to be fired." I brushed his hand away and hit him in the jaw as hard as I could. He fell to the ground and I grabbed his shirt as soon as he fell over. Rearing back to punch him again, he said, "Look, you don't want to lose your job and I don't want to lose my favorite whipping boy. So you better play ball or you're going to be out of here. And if you don't notice, there's a lot of police around." I let go of him and pushed him back to the ground. I said, "Good, because they quit." I made my way out of the tent feeling like $1,000,000. Then reality set in that I was now jobless, and I just rocked my boss's jaw. I trotted my way to the car, and I smacked my head against the steering wheel as many times as I could before my head wouldn't allow it anymore. My life was falling apart, and I just drove my way back home. I walked in, and my friend was sitting there watching the TV, and he said, "Holy crap, man, you're not going to believe this. Dude, you know that place you work at? It blew up." I said, "I know, I just came from there." He's like, "Dude, no way. Are you okay?" He's like, "Dude, aren't you reading the headlines? It happened last night." Again, in the back of my head, I was like, "Oh, God, I hope he doesn't put 2 and 2 together." Of course, then again, this guy's pretty oblivious, so I'm not very worried about it. He came in and said, "Yeah, I went to the bar after you left. And it's crazy because I saw Aberdeen there." Inside my head, I exploded. I was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Wait, what?" He's like, "Dude, just because you broke up doesn't mean the woman's going to leave town. Look, man, you don't got a lot going for you. Unless you got something going on downstairs." I blushed a little and said, "Dude, no, wait, what? She's still here?" She's like, "Yeah, the dive bar on 3rd Street that I go to sometimes. It was a little bit of a tough crowd, some bikers and stuff, so I kind of left. But yeah, she was in the back. Dude, she is clobbered, by the way." I laughed a little bit and I said, Is she still there? He's like, probably. She was barely able to move at that point. He's like, do you think that, like, she's like, and I interrupted him and put my hand against his mouth and said, dude, I'm leaving. I gotta go get her back. Well, it looks like you do like her, he said. And he said, here, take this, here, take the keys, and here, clean yourself up a little bit, dude. Don't you think you should change or something? No, it's not. I don't have time, I said. I got in my car and I sped my way there. I made my way to the bar on 3rd Street and walked my way down the steps to the basement where it was at. I opened the door and smog and cigarette smoke and the smell of urine filled the air. It was definitely one of those kind of bars. The people at the bar closest to the door glared at me as they squinted their eyes, telling me to shut the door. The light was too much, like a bunch of goblins being found for the first time underground. I shut the door and the smell was even worse as I got in. People were laughing, the crack of billiard balls were everywhere, clanks of drinks, and people chugging down whatever they can in the background, with the thick facade of George Thorogood and the Destroyers in the background from the jukebox. I made my way towards the back table where she was at, and I looked at her. There she was with her head tucked back, with her arms wrapped around a lot of her gal pals that she had made in town. They were all drinking and having fun. There were bottles everywhere. Some spilled, and it was a mess. She was in the back, with her arms wrapped around her friends, with her head pointed up towards the ceiling with a cigarette in one hand and a shot glass in the other. She was soused to the gills. I could tell. I walked over and said, Abby, we need to talk. Her friends were like, oh, it's the suit guy. Hey, what's going on? I said, I'm not talking to you. Sit down. They got a little offended and said, who the heck do you think you are? I was like, we need to talk. Me and her, not you guys. Abby didn't answer and continued to puff a cigarette. I was pissed. I couldn't think of anything else, but I noticed that everybody else was starting to crowd around. The bar owner began to walk towards me with a shotgun and said, we need to talk, buddy. I pushed the shotgun away and tipped the table over and said, we need to talk now, Abby. Again, he raised his gun and said, buddy, if you don't get out of here. I tried to think of something because I was definitely frightened of the gun poking in the back of my head. I told her that we had kids and that she'd been gone for days and I just found her. Of course I lied, and Abby gritted her teeth and said, that's a lie, as she tried to stumble to stand. I walked towards her and she put her foot on my chest, trying to push me away, and she said, I don't want to go with you. I'm done with you. You broke my heart, and her friends tried to stand up for her. The bartender put his shotgun down and said, if you've got kids, you need to leave. You've had plenty. I laughed and said, yeah, she's been causing trouble for me all day. Abby looked around and was like, you guys aren't seriously buying this. And she kind of fell to the floor. I was a little disgusted at her. He said, sir, I'll help you take her out. So me and the bartender grabbed one of her arms and dragged her out of the building. We set her up on a bus stop bench just outside for the drunks to get home safely. With a combination of the fresh air, the sounds, and the light from the sun, she leaned over and vomited all over the ground. The bartender made his way back into the bar, and I held her hair back. It was hilarious because a bunch of families and kids were driving by in their cars with their windows down, laughing. I sat there waving, and she made sure to tell me that she was upset with me with the number of explicatives and road rage fingers. I told her, are you finished? Are you done? She looked back up at me and was like, what do you want from me? And she pulled a flask out of her jacket. I smacked the drink out of her hand and said, we need to get our story straight. Why would you drag me into this? He's like, why would you drag yourself into this? There are plenty of other suckers in your job, but you fell for me. And it's like, but you fell for me, as I grabbed her. Our faces got close, and she went in to kiss me, and I pushed her away. He's like, I'm not going to kiss you. She said, it was a hot moment. We were supposed to kiss, as she was slurring her words and rocking back and forth. I said, we're not going to kiss. You smell like vomit, urine. He's like, that's not my urine. That's somebody else. We partied pretty hard last night. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I pushed her onto the floor. I went back to my car and grabbed a bottle of water and doused her with it. She sat there telling me to stop as I poured it all over her. I was like, dude, you need to take a shower. I grabbed her as she passed out and threw her in the back of my car. And we drove back home. I had my buddy to open the door as I tried to get her through the front door. Her legs would smack one door jamb, and I would try to motion her sideways, and finally, when I got through it, knocked her head against the door. Ooh, my friend said as he laughed a little bit. He's like, dude, she really is drunk. I was like, help me get her in the tub. He's like, no, bro, that's That's your girl? I'm not dealing with that. And plus, she smells like piss. Oh, it's somebody else's piss, I said. And he's like, What? You guys are into some weird stuff. I'm gonna go eat some chips or something over there, man. As we meandered our way up the steps, trying to keep her steady without falling down, I dumped her into the tub and turned on the cold water. I couldn't help but stare because she was actually quite a beautiful woman, and I felt like a total perv. She came to looking at me. She was totally naked. She looked around. She was covering herself. She screamed, "What am I doing in the shower? And why are you standing here?" He's like, "You came in the shower whenever I was there." She's like, "It's different when I do it, though." She smacked me once or twice and said, "Get out! Get out!" And as she was throwing things at me, I was covering my head as I made my way out of the bathroom. I kept the door cracked so I could talk to her. I asked her why did she do all the things she did. She said, "I had a plan and I needed to get it back. And it's not up to you to know because it's my business." Like, oh, it's my business because now people are investigating whether or not this was arson. It's like, did anybody die? And I was like, no, nobody died. Thank goodness. She's like, it's a shame. That would have made things more interesting. I couldn't believe the gall of this girl, acting all cool and calm. I kicked the door in. I said, "We gotta talk about this. Seriously, we need to get our story straight or we're gonna get arrested." She looked at me and laughed and said, "Look, it's like, the way I did it and the way I handled it, things will be okay. It's like, I destroyed the building, I got the cure I wanted, and now I can help people by selling it." It's like, "But you're no better than them." It's like, "No, I'm going to sell it cheap or just give it away. I don't know what I'm going to do. You're asking me too much. I'm drunk right now. Leave me alone." I walked up to her as she was peeking her head out of the curtain. I stared at her and I said, "We seriously need to talk about this. We could go to jail or something." She looked at me again and she said, "Okay, let's get serious. If we get caught, I'll turn myself in. If anything bad happens, I'll just say that I held you at gunpoint or something like that." I couldn't believe it. This is the most unselfish I've ever heard her. And I said, "Really?" She looked at me and put her finger against my nose and poked me and said, "Nope. I'll just say you did it the whole time." My eyes got wide and I stumbled back and was like, "You can't be, you're kidding. I don't want to go to jail." It's like, "Yeah, you are a bit of jailbait." And she smacked me on the face. I sat down next to her on one of the stools that we had in there for haircuts. She continued to sing and scrub herself off in the shower, and all the while I was looking down at the floor. She looked at me again and said, "You worry too much. Don't worry about it. I have everything handled. The way I did it, nobody will find out it was us." And I looked at her, "But what if they do?" She's like, "Again, the what ifs are annoying. You're giving me a headache. I've got a migraine." At this point, I looked down, and as soon as I looked back up, she was standing in front of me, dripping wet. Naked as the day she was born. My eyes got wide, and she came up to me while I was sitting down. I'm not gonna lie, as a guy, I couldn't help but stare. She grabbed me by the chin and looked in my eyes. She kissed me on the lips and said, "It'll all be fine." Even with all this fallout and all this crazy aftermath that's going on, how could she be so calm? She grabbed me and she hugged me. At first I was a little nervous because she was completely in the buff and soaking wet. She whispered in my ear, "Don't worry about it. Everything's gonna be okay." And you know what? I believed it again. And I wouldn't have it any other way.